need to get this link.
Yeah, we just need a link to send to the other.
There's the link. How do we send it?
Where's Ali Roo? Oh, I'm talking Caitlin and Nate.
Girls came outside.
You
Watch
gotta
this
get-
wire.
Oh, sorry.
You're right.
Share. Link. Okay, you got it. Oh, you. We pulled it through. Okay. Microphone. Check 1, 2. Okay.
Watch this wire here.
Check 1, 2. Hey. Okay. I'm gonna have you fall. And then this you can. Oh crap.
Thank you. Is this working? Can you hear me? Oh, okay, great. All right, everyone. My name is Sarah Hyatt. I am your school social worker here at Wilsonville High School. And I would like to first thank Pam Pierce, who is a community member of West Linn. Pam, if you can go ahead and just stand for a quick moment. Pam is dedicated to helping people in communities prevent substance use by making sure everyone has the information and tools that they need to make informed decisions and thrive. One of those tools was meeting Dr. Crystal Collier, who I will introduce in a moment. Pam leads the Teen Advisory Board Student Club at West Linn High School and co-founded Harmony Academy, which is Oregon's first recovery high school. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Crystal Collier. She is an expert in adolescent brain development, prevention programs, parent coaching, and addiction. She developed an online ready-to-use prevention platform called knowyourneuro.org, which educates students, parents, and school staff about how risky behaviors affect brain development. Dr. Collier welcomes questions throughout this whole presentation, so please don't hesitate to ask. If you have a question, most likely others might have a similar question. And then when we end, you'll go ahead and return to your life class, and if there's time, you'll discuss your learning from today. So if everyone can give a big warm welcome to Dr. Collier.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. All right, I need the screen up if I could get that, please. Oh, okay. I'm not seeing it. Let's see. That's okay. Tech.
Okay, so I'm back. Thank you guys. Thank you guys for being theater's fun. Theater's a great thing. And there's often, little technical difficulties like the projector turned off for no apparent reason. So we're getting that queued up, and then our guest speaker will be right with you. And I'm just stalling for time. So
It was working, right?
It was.
Why did it stop? Try the other HDMI.
This one was working. Okay, it is on. Could you guys give our tech guys a round of applause? They're applying for you. Thank you. My name is Dr. Crystal Collier. I am a therapist. I flew up yesterday from Houston, Texas to be with you guys. I'm going to share a PowerPoint presentation that is called the Neuroscience of High-Risk Behavior. But I first want to qualify myself to give you this information today. And so what really qualifies me is, bless you, is a little bit about my history. So when I was a young person, I engaged in a lot of risky behavior, and I'm not talking about my 1980s hairdo. But these are pictures of me when I was growing up. When I was about 11, 12 years old, my parents sat me down and said, "We are getting a divorce. And Crystal, you and Mom are going to move to the big city, Houston, Texas." I lived in a teeny tiny little small Texas town. And I remember thinking, oh my God, it's such a big city. I am so absolutely terrified. I started to well with tears, and my mom said, "Stop, don't cry. We're going to move to a place that has a pool." So that was the day that I learned I can't feel, I can't talk about what's going on, and I definitely can't show emotions because I have to take care of her. So my mom worked 2 to 3 jobs while she was single parenting me. And I was what's called the latchkey kid, which means I was home for hours and hours and hours before anybody was home. I remember thinking that I wanted the guy on Gunsmoke to be my dad because he was always there, he was always consistent. And so when my mom registered me for school, I saw the sign that said summer school registration, and I was like, oh my God, I want to sign up for summer school because if I take summer school, then I might meet kids who could be my friends for the regular school year. And so I did that. What do you guys think? Good idea, bad idea? Yeah, most adults say, oh, what a good idea. Most young people say, no. I met a lot of really great kids who were making a lot of really bad decisions. And one of them, really cute guy, he says, oh, I'll introduce you to lots of people. I'll take you to a party this weekend. Now, I lived in a trailer park, and so I was really, really happy because the party was inside the trailer park, so I knew it could go. And he took me, and I walked in to the party, and an adult handed me a beer. Now, I was about 2 weeks shy of my 13th birthday party, and I thought, okay, I don't think I'm supposed to do this, but my mom hasn't really said anything about it, so gulp. What I did not know is in that very moment, the genes that had been passed down from my dad's side and my mom's side kicked in, and I started processing alcohol very differently than other people who did not have those genetics. Now, by the time I was 16 years old, I kept taking summer school because my mom kept moving every single year. Now, to be fair, we had a nicer apartment every single time we moved, but that meant a new school and all the things that come with being the new student. And so I kept taking summer school classes. I was a straight A student. I was like an anxious, rule-following kid. But I would sneak out at night and go party with anybody who invited me to go. And this other really cute boy when I was 16 years old said, "Oh, you shouldn't snort that. Let me show you how to use it in a needle." Another bad decision. So I started using substances intravenously. And that is when I started wearing long sleeve shirts all the time. Now, by the time I got to the end of my junior year, my counselor said, "You have so many credits, why don't we just move you into college? Like, you could take one college credit, we could graduate you, and you could go on." And I was so excited. So I moved out of the house. I got an apartment, I got a drug dealer, I got a job waiting tables, and I enrolled into college. I was like, dude, I can adult, check, 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 check. Now, I graduated to bigger and better risky behavior. My first semester of college, I'm not gonna lie, it was a blast. Everybody came to our house to party, but it made me so mad because when people come to your house to party, do they clean up after themselves? No. No, if they punch a hole in the wall, do they come back and fix it? No. And so my beautiful apartment was like trashed after the first semester. I made a 4.0, all A's my first semester in college, but my second semester, my body was just not able to catch up. I made my first B, then my first C ever. I was staying up all night partying and just really struggling the next day. And by my third semester, I'm in class at 8 a.m., terrible time to make a college student go to class, but I'm sleeping, and this sweet professor, he taps me on the shoulder and he said, "Can I help you?" He looks at me in the eyes, and I've got like drool on my desk. It was gross. And I knew he knew. My sleeves had been up, and as soon as I looked down, I saw the tracks. And I pulled my sleeves down, I grabbed my book bag, I went straight to the registrar's office, and I dropped out. 2 weeks later, I had a pretty bad overdose. Now, the week before that, one of my friends that I was using with OD'd. And this guy was like 6 feet something tall. He had been in the Air Force. And he kept showing me how to shoot up in the same place over and over and over because he didn't want his military to catch him. And we scored one night, and he started to seize. And all I could think about was, I cannot believe he's doing this. We just scored. I could not think about him dying. I could not think about saving him. I just was pissed that he was ruining my high. And so I drug his body into the bathtub and turned on the shower and kept using. And just by the grace of God, I woke up and he was still alive. And 1 week later, when it happened to me, he called 911. He did the right thing. And when I woke up the next day in the hospital, I was hurting, I was withdrawing, I was pissed, I was terrified. And I picked up the 1,000-pound phone, and I called my mother, who had no idea what was going on. I hid it from her. And I said, "I need help. I need to go to rehab." And so she said, "Whatever you do, don't use, We will get you into treatment. And I went home, discharged from the hospital against the medical advice. I went home because I knew I had drugs. You know those little teeny tiny pockets in your jeans? I used to stash drugs there because nobody would find them. And I knew I had some left. And I was like, I'm going to use one more time, which is incredibly dangerous because I had just had an OD and thank God survived it. But I woke up the next day and I was ready. My mom knocks on the door and I went to rehab. And so 28 days later, this big Texas hair picture of me was taken. I got this t-shirt that said drug-free body. I still have that t-shirt today. But I've been sober since February 3rd, 1989. Thank you. It's always weird. It's always so weird to receive. It's always so weird to receive applause for that because I think that I'm just showing up as a good human being, taking good care of myself and my loved ones. But it is pretty amazing when somebody has a debilitating disease to survive and get better. So here's what I did. I started researching high-risk behavior, and all of these really cool brain studies were being published when I finally got back into school after taking a gap year to go to a halfway house to get a lot more treatment and recovery. I went to a different state, so I was away from all of my drug dealers and my drug-using friends, and I really got to start over sober. So what I started doing is collecting information about risky behavior, and I found these really interesting studies. So this is what's called a longitudinal study. They take kids when they're really, really young, and they track them over time to see, okay, what did they do, what didn't they do, and how did they fare? And what they found is that when young people start using anything young, they actually increase their risk of growing up and struggling with any kind of addiction, drugs, alcohol, behavioral, anything. But what I also found is that when people wait to try or use anything until they're 21 years old, you can see this perfect slope down. They almost completely eliminate their risk of growing up and becoming an addict to anything, drugs, alcohol, any kind of behaviors. So this was perplexing. I was like, dude, what is the deal? Just waiting? Why is that such a powerful prevention technique? And then I discovered these studies that show when mental health issues start. So as you can see, these are almost every single major mental health issue that we diagnose people with. And the onset, meaning when the symptoms begin, are around elementary, middle, or high school. Okay, so this started me thinking, like, what is going on in our brain that makes us so fragile? So I started putting a list together. The kids that I was working with and helping at the mental hospitals that I was a tech at, I started to see all the things they were struggling with and that their families were struggling with. I never saw just one of these things on their own. So I kept compiling the information and I put it into a book. So this is called the Neuro Whereabouts Guide. Now, it's actually for parents. I wrote it in infographic style so that people would have fun to read. But what I did was I put them in order of occurrence. Okay, so when do all these things spike? I've had so many young people read this book because they saw it on their parents' coffee table or the desk and say, wait, I want one of these for me. So over the past 3 years, I've had high school and college interns help me rewrite this for you with the latest research in it. And what we also started to do was put it in video format. So this website, knowyourneuro.org, is where this information is. And I want you to hear, I think my mic just, announcements. You're welcome. Okay, there we go. So, my students, my interns, and I started putting together videos, doing more research to figure out, okay, how do all of these high-risk behavior affect the brain, and what can you do about it? What we know today is that addiction for profit is winning. Think about all the places that you go in the world, all the things that you see advertised. How many of those products that are advertised to you and your family have to do with addiction or have the propensity to get you addicted? So when I did that, I thought, oh my God, I've got to figure out how to help kids from very young on. So one of my high school interns had this beautiful idea of writing a children's book series. So we started to take the information in the adult books and making them for kids. And so this is Neuro. Neuro is the superhero of my children's book series, and I want you guys to know that a lot of my high school and college interns helped me with these series. So if anybody is interested in interning with me, I've got some of the series down there. If you have an idea about a video that you might want to create, a children's book, any way that you want to help me educate the world, please check out knowyourneuro.org and fill out an internship application. Now, what I want to do is I want to give you some information in 4 chunks. 4 things that you guys need to know to combat what you are seeing out there in the world. Now, I first want to talk about brain development and how I teach it to kids in the adventures of neuro. So this is the first chunk, is the 2 areas of the brain that you need to know and understand and how they develop. And the way we do that is with this guy. This is Dr. Lawrence Steinberg. He is a badass neuroscientist who has studied adolescent brain development. Now, he has taken his research into the criminal justice world, and he helps to make sure that young people, when they are arrested for crimes, that they are actually tried as juveniles because their brain is not fully developed yet. Now, Dr. Lawrence Steinberg said that adolescents have a well-developed accelerator, but only a partly developed brake. So we start with the accelerator, the part of the brain that makes you go, and sometimes go too fast. It is called the limbic system. Everybody say limbic system. I think their limbic system is well developed. The limbic system is the accelerator. This is the part of the brain that thinks in very concrete ways. All or nothing, black and white. As a matter of fact, it's not a thinker, it's a reactor. It is located deep inside of your skull, protected by all of those lobes. Now, the accelerator, not the thinker, just the reactor, it is fully online and developed. Who can guess how old you are? 6, 25? 11, 12 years old. You guys, what else is happening around 11, 12 years old? Exactly. You start going through puberty or mid-puberty around that time. This is when the limbic system is fully online and developed. This is the reactionary fight or flight survival part of the brain, and it kind of makes sense because we need to protect ourselves in very new and different ways by the time we hit that age, but we also have to get really curious about the world. We have to go out there and start trying on everything we can try on to figure out who we are. That is why this part of the brain is fully online and developed. Now, the next part, the brakes, the part right behind your forehead, halfway up the skull, what is that part called? The frontal lobe. The prefrontal cortex, the part that actually slows you down, helps you make good decisions, not fully online until around the age of 25. Okay, we need time to go out. when we're still protected and figure out who we are and try on lots of things and make some dumb decisions. That's all kind of the normal part of our brain's development. But the next thing you need to know is that first stage, from birth to about puberty, we grow 200 billion brain cells. What is the technical name for a brain cell? A neuron. That's a lot of neurons. It's kind of like we get this big chunk of clay in our brain. Now, we don't know what it's going to look like. But what our job is in that second stage of brain development, from puberty to around the age of 25, our next job is to sculpt this into what will be our adult masterpiece of a brain that has 100 billion neurons left over. Now, I remember sitting in class when I learned this information in school and college, and I was thinking, dude, is it all the risky behavior that I did? Did I really kill all my brain cells? And the answer to that is no. This happens to everyone. We actually lose half of the perfectly good neurons that we just developed because we need room to grow connectors. So let me introduce you to a little baby brain cell, a little infant neuron magnified so that we can see it. You've got the cell body, the long axon, what looks like tree branches and tree roots. Those are called dendrites. Say dendrites 3 times fast. Dendrites Respect. Thanks. Dendrites are my favorite brain structure too, because dendrites are literally the hardware of learning. Every time you learn something new or you grow something, you practice something, you grow new dendrites that reach out to other cells, making long chains of connections of neurons in your brain. Now, what you're seeing is that little infant's brain cells growing all the way up to age 2. That's just age 2. Imagine how many neurons you already have connected in your brain. Now, by the time you are 25 years old, every neuron in your brain is connected to 10,000 other neurons. But all of those neural pathways for all of your skills literally have to squash down in your brain, and that is what makes all those funky wrinkles and grooves in your brain. Babies actually have a very smooth surface on their brain. We get these wrinkles as we grow our skills. Now you can see by the time we're about 11, 12 years old, we've got about 10 to 15% of our adult brain. By the time we're 16, we have about 45% of what adult brain we will have. By the time we're 20, we have 80%. We have a whole fifth of brain development to go between 20 and 25. All of these connectors are growing, and we're getting rid of neurons to make room. That is why this says the darker the color, the less gray matter. Gray matter is the actual nickname for the cell, but white matter is the nickname for the dendrites, those connectors. Now, what is growing in this part of the brain? This has been nicknamed your CEO, the Chief Executive Officer of your brain and your body, because it does executive functioning skills, and they grow according to those 2 phases. Now, this part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, does what we nickname your basic thinking, feeling, and doing skills. And they grow according to these 2 stages. Now, what I want you guys to do is read through these 2 lists and rate yourselves on a scale of 1 to 10. What are you good at? And what do you need some improvement in? So the skills on the left. So the skills on the left are what scientists refer to as lower level executive functioning skills. These are the ones that we need to get up in the morning, out the door, remembering our lunch. The ones on the right, these are the ones that scientists refer to as higher level executive functioning skills. The ones we need to grow up out of our parents' house, becoming fully self-supporting relational adults. Now, what is critical for y'all to understand about these skills is they grow based upon the brain's rule. The brain's rule is use it or... Okay, so let me go back to here for a second. Whenever I get a client who's been in trouble, a lot of times schools will send clients to me that are y'all's age, younger, older, and their parents will all come in. And we sit in my office and I say, okay, I always look at the student and I say, tell me why you're here. And if that student looks over at mom or dad and doesn't say anything, I think, uh-oh, we've got a lazy thinker, lazy talker. Here's why I say that. Because usually they have a parent who's been doing all of their problem solving and decision making for them. Anybody got an over-functioning helicopter parent in here? Oh, a little bit, okay. So here's the dangerous part. If you have a parent, if you have a parent or a caregiver who does all of your problem solving and decision making for you, you won't grow long networks of neurons for these skills, but you will grow long networks of neurons for dependency on somebody else to do that for you. So, important to remember that all of these executive functioning skills grow based upon the brain's rule. One more time, use it or? Thank you. Okay. Now what we're going to do in part 2. Now that you understand the 2 areas of your brain and how they're growing and developing, we're going to talk about how they work together. Now, these 2 parts of the brain work together through something called a reward pathway. So we need to understand how they connect. First, the accelerator gets hijacked. Now, this is this beautiful accelerator in 3D blue, the limbic system. Respect. Thank you. I appreciate that. The limbic system in 3D blue. Remember, this is your reactor. Not the thinker, just the reactor. Now, it does 2 main things. First, all of your fight or flight survival, but the second is all your pleasurable experiences happen because they start right here. Now, here's what happens. When there is something really good for you in your environment, your limbic system is in charge of learning by increasing one of these neurotransmitters, dopamine. Now, we have 4 different neurotransmitters that make us feel happy in some way, shape, or form. If you are connecting with someone, oxytocin will help you fall in love with them. If you are in pain, endorphins will help soothe you. If you need to regulate your mood, your muscles, serotonin will help you. But we're going to focus on dopamine because dopamine's primary job is to teach you, to help you learn what is good for your survival and what is not. And this is the reward pathway. So when there is a person, place, or thing good for you in your environment, your limbic system gives you a little shot of dopamine that says, woo, this is good. Good for your survival. Feel calm and happy when you engage with this, and then memorize that. Then it sends a signal to your prefrontal cortex that says, attach. attached to this. It's so good for you. And then it memorizes it. So whenever that person, place, or thing is in your environment, you get a shot of dopamine in anticipation and when it's there. It is the exact same pathway that gets hijacked. This is exactly how we connect. I love this beautiful picture. This little teeny tiny limbic system is like, dude, whenever she's around, I get fed, I get cuddled, I get warm. I'm going to increase dopamine because she is really good for my survival. I'm going to memorize that and send a signal to my prefrontal cortex that is attached to her. She's good for us. And then we get the signal back that says, check, memorized it. Now whenever we see her, think about her, smell her, we get an anticipatory dopamine spike and these warm, fuzzy feelings. Exact same pathway that gets hijacked by drugs or alcohol or other risky behavior. Here's how it works. You guys know when you haven't eaten. Let's say you missed breakfast and you had to skip lunch. How do you feel at about 8 o'clock at night? No food. Tired, hangry, moody, hangry, hungry. Here's what's happening. Your limbic system is depleting itself of dopamine. It's saying, dude, you are starving. You got to go eat. I'm going to make you feel really uncomfortable until you do. There's an old joke that the world is 3 meals away from utter chaos. Can you imagine if everybody went without 3 meals in a row, all over? We'd be really in a lot of chaos. But your limbic system is depleting itself, and as soon as you eat, you get a 100% increase in dopamine. Your brain says, good job keeping me alive. Here is your reward. Feel calm and happy. For like the next 4 or 5 hours, we'll do it all again. Now, there are other human behaviors that we do when we're married and protected, right, guys? Thank you. When humans and animals engage in sexual activity, they get a dopamine increase of 150%. Now their limbic system, limbic system is saying, dude, this is not only good for your survival, but it's good for your species survival, so here is your reward. If somebody snorts a line of cocaine about this long, they get a dopamine increase of 350% increase of dopamine. Thank you. I appreciate your respect. Here's what's happening. Remember, your limbic system is not a thinker. It's just a reactor. It's good at math, though. It basically says, hey, whenever you put this in my body, I get 250% more dopamine than when you put this in my body. So that must mean this is 250% better for my survival than this. But is that true? No. No. But there are other drugs that go even farther. If somebody uses the exact same amount of methamphetamine, they get a dopamine increase of 1,100%. Yeah, meth is pretty bad. And for those of you guys, who've known someone who got trapped by meth addiction, you've seen it. You may even love someone who has that addiction. Heroin is between 800 and 1,300%. But let me share with you, alcohol is between 125 and about 225. Marijuana is anywhere between 225 and 350 today. It used to not be, but it's genetically modified now to be as addictive and as strong as cocaine. But here's the problem. Your brain has a threshold. They call it the hedonic or pleasure threshold. That is basically how much dopamine that your brain can express in any given moment. We can go up to about a 200% increase at any time during the day. So what happens? Your limbic system just keeps you in balance. When you are hungry, your dopamine plummets. When you eat, it goes back up. When you're sad, lonely, you want to hang out with your friends. Even smiling, eye contact brings dopamine up in your system because those are good things for your survival. But let me share with you, there are two things that happen when we go above that threshold. If we travel deep inside the limbic system, dopamine comes across the synapse, binds to the receptor sites, the signal goes down the cell, and so on. But when we engage in something that depletes our cells of all the dopamine, we can't produce the same amount of dopamine for a few hours, a few minutes, a few weeks, maybe even months afterward. And this is why they say, right, that it's like you have a hangover the next day. You don't feel very good. It's not just dehydration, but it's moodiness. It's irritability, memory problems, because your brain does not have the same amount of dopamine that it did. It takes time to replenish that. Like I said, hours, weeks, months, we don't know, depending upon the substance and how much of it that person did. Now, that's the first structural change. Here's the good news. Your brain can heal from that. You can replenish the amount of dopamine after a few days, a few weeks, and go back to normal, hopefully. But the second structural change you cannot heal from. So this is a long dendrite with receptor sites on it. And when somebody floods their brain with too much dopamine, your brain grows more receptor sites. It literally compensates and learns. Wow, there's so much dopamine in our system, we need to grow more receptor sites. This is a really sped up simulation of what a tolerance looks like. Somebody uses, they grow a few more receptor sites, and then the next time they're like, man, I have to use something stronger, or I have to drink more to get the same effect. But what's happening in their brain is they're growing more and more receptor sites for dopamine until one day we cross this invisible line. We have one too many receptor sites. And now all of these extra receptor sites are in there doing what? Craving, withdrawing, screaming. It's subtle. It happens a little bit, over a little bit, over a little bit. One of my clients never used weed while he was in high school. He gets to college, and one of his friends, he's like, stress. He's like, dude, this will help you de-stress. He's like, no, I don't do that. He says no a lot. And the second semester, he's like, F it, I'm so stressed. He takes a hit, and he's like, wow, this really works well to calm me down. And within one semester, he went from not smoking to smoking 3 times a day. What his brain did, it is exposed to too much dopamine from that drug. And little by little by little, it grows more receptor sites. And now by the end of this one semester, he starts to crave it. Now, it's subtle, like it usually is with things like marijuana. You just think about it. Like, oh, it'd be nice to smoke, or I'm just going to do an edible to get to sleep, little by little, until he tells me one day that if he doesn't use it within 2 to 3 days, he is down, he's depressed, he's angry, he's irritable, he is now in withdrawal. He always says that he takes tea breaks. He lets those extra receptor sites close up so that he can experience the same high that he did before. But every time he takes a tea break and he uses a little bit more, what happens? he grows a few more receptor sites. And now he's even a little bit more addicted than he was before. Until that one day he crosses that invisible line and he can't go back. Because those brain structures are brain structures. We can't uncreate them. This is why we have a saying, once an addict, we can't go backwards. Now, this is the hedonic threshold of most of us. This is the hedonic threshold of most of us. But if you're like me and you have it in your genetic history, this is your threshold. Now, here's what I did. I took my genetic test a few years back, and I found out that my body doesn't make the same amount of dopamine that other people do. Thank you, Mom and Dad, and all the genetics in our family that were passed down. Now, you may make less serotonin, less oxytocin. You may make less GABA or norepinephrine. And that is going to determine which substance or activity or drug that you like the most. I don't make enough dopamine and I don't make enough serotonin. And guess what increases dopamine and serotonin? Cocaine. This is why that was my specific drug of choice. My husband, who is a recovering alcoholic, he does not make enough dopamine or GABA, which is our inhibitory hormone. And guess what increases both of those? Alcohol. And that is why that was his drug of choice. But I had a young lady come see me one year. She walks into my office. She's totally in trouble from school because she brought a water bottle to a basketball game that had what in it? Yeah, it was not water. She gets caught because it smells. And she sits down and she's like, dude, you are the brain lady. You came to my high school a few years ago. You did this really great brain presentation. I didn't smoke weed for like a whole month. And I was like, okay, great, good. But then what happened? And she was like, well, I got to high school. And you know, everybody does it there. But she said, check it out though. My best friend is my accountability buddy. And so we would always go together. We always had each other's backs. Like if she drank one, I drank one. If she took one hit, I took one hit. If she took one pill, I took one pill. And I'm like, okay, this kind of like, I don't know, 50% makes sense, which makes sense because 16, right? You've got 50% thereabouts of your frontal lobe. And I'm like, okay, well, what happened? And she said, well, my best friend's dad won't let her hang out with me anymore because every time we went out, she would just sip and I would drink. She would take one and I would take three. Like she always lied to her best friend and did a little bit more behind her back. So her best friend was always getting in trouble because she had to carry her drunk, passed out, vomiting best friend home. My first question for this young lady, can you guess what it is? Do you have any addiction in your family tree anywhere? And she was like, duh, yes. That's why my grandparents have custody of me and why I sneak out because they're old. And I'm like, okay, wait a second, back up. Why do they have custody of you? And she said, well, both of my parents are addicts and they've been institutionalized. I'm like, what do you mean institutionalized? She's like, yeah, they're both in a mental hospital. They fried their brains. So my grandparents take care of me. Now, here's what we know. This young lady, her threshold is this red line. She makes less of maybe dopamine, neurotransmitters, whatever else, so her threshold is lower. But her best friend does not have any of those genetics in her family tree, so her best friend's line is right here. Now, even though they both start drinking and using like the exact same amount, all this young lady has to do is spike past that red line for those structural changes to start occurring. She makes those changes to her brain faster. Now, her best friend, she never spiked dopamine levels past her threshold, so she never became an addict. But I love this slide because it teaches everybody how, if you just go above that line, you can get addicted. You can make those changes to your brain. But if you have a genetic predisposition, it happens to you sooner. There's a question. Is dopamine bad? That is a great question. Could you please give her a round of applause? Good question. That is an incredibly astute connection, because dopamine is actually really amazing and wonderful. It is the tool in our brain and body that helps us learn. What is bad is anybody out there in the world selling you anything that spikes dopamine levels too high. That is what's bad. Now that you know how your accelerator gets hijacked, let's talk about how your brakes also. So this is a really amazing study of two different dudes looking from the top down into the brain. Now, it's a functional MRI. So what they're doing is they're looking at brain activity. And the guy at the top that took a picture 1 second apart, the guy at the top is completely sober. This is what our brain looks like when we are sober. All the parts are on, and the darker the color, the more activity. Now, the guy at the bottom, he ingested cocaine as a part of this study. He had already been using it for quite a long time, and he came in as a research participant. But what we notice is that the limbic system, which you can see here and here, it stays lit up. But that frontal lobe, what they call it, is down-regulation. It moves all the electrical activity, or most of it, into that limbic system. He's high, he's intoxicated. His brain is flooded with dopamine, too much dopamine. He is enjoying this in that moment. And now think about it. You know, think about like on Thanksgiving. Like when we overeat on Thanksgiving, what do you feel like doing after overeating on Thanksgiving? Sleeping, right? You don't feel like doing executive functions, right? You don't want to have deep empathic conversations or solve problems, right? Or focus on anything. Because you are full of dopamine from that high sugar, high carby food. And so what happens is your brain down regulates. Now, if you do that every day because of sugar-dense, high-calorie foods, drugs, alcohol, gambling, pornography, anything like that, this is what the brain looks like. Once you're down-regulated, the frontal lobe is off for a little bit. Now, if you're an adult and you choose to do this, that is your choice. But if you are young, if you're between the ages of birth and 25 and your frontal lobe is growing, does it get to grow when it's down-regulated? No, it doesn't. It does not get to grow like it should. They used to call it arrested development. Now they call it hypofrontality. Say that 3 times fast. So here's an example of hypofrontality. Let's say a young person starts using substances at about the age of 12. But then they don't stop. They keep going. And they choose to stop at about age 20. Okay, they stopped. But does their frontal lobe look like that? It does not. Good job. It looks more like somewhere in between here. It doesn't get to grow like it should. And I have a little tiny conspiracy theory. I actually think Addiction for Profit likes this effect because they don't want you to use your executive functioning skills. They don't want you to have good judgment. They don't want you to have impulse control. They want you to make reactive decisions so you get a huge dopamine spike. But here's part of the problem. It takes time to heal. And if you know or love somebody who has an addiction, you are suffering while you watch that happen. Because here is that cocaine abuser, 10 days sober. Sober, you guys. He is in detox. His poor limbic system is like, what the? Where is that thing that I think I need to survive? And here you go, 100 days sober. It takes about 18 months, a year and a half, before that brain turns back to this level of functioning. But do you guys have a year and a half of frontal lobe development that you are willing to spare? Good. Give her a round of applause. So I put a few studies in. This one, you guys, it's my favorite. They had a really hard time finding young people who had just done one thing, specifically alcohol. What you see is two 15-year-olds, and they're taking the same memory test in a functional MRI machine. Now, when I read this study, this young man said, "Oh yeah, I drink every weekend." They interviewed his father, and they said, "What are your rules about alcohol and drugs?" And his dad says, "Oh, he knows he can never use drugs, but he can use alcohol at home only where it's safe." Now, when they interviewed him, they said, "What are your family rules about drugs and alcohol?" He's like, "Oh my God, my dad would kill me if I did drugs, but he doesn't care if I drink." Doesn't care? It's not quite what his dad said. Now, it's pretty obvious that he has a lot less electrical activity than our non-drinker, but do you guys see the subtle differences in structure? Yeah, okay. Now remember, when you grow those long dendrites, those neuronal pathways for your skills, they have to squish down in your brain, making all those funky wrinkles and grooves. You can see those wrinkles and grooves happening for our non-drinker, but not for our heavy drinker. He has what we call diffuse arrested development all over his brain. If he continues like this, he's going to suffer with that for the rest of his life. If we look at marijuana, this is a really early study. It's called a SPECT scan. We're looking from the bottom up through the brain, and if all of your dendrites are growing and connected, you're going to see a nice smooth scan. Now, these two guys have been smoking the green leafy bud for quite a few years. Now, what you see, these are areas of the brain that have not connected yet. They're not there. It's not, he doesn't have holes in his brain. But what is this part of the brain called? The frontal lobe. It's not connecting. If we look at nicotine from cigarettes or for vaping, nicotine is the #1 most addictive drug on the face of the earth, but it doesn't cause intoxication. So people think it's okay. But you can see how it downregulates the whole entire brain, especially that prefrontal cortex. And if we look at technology, this is a study that was done in Japan. They looked at two high school groups of students. They looked at brain connectivity, all those dendrites. And if you were to connect all the red dots, you would see the brain connectivity of a group of students who had a really balanced life. They did like a little bit of recreational tech, a lot of academic tech, a lot of in-person time, and a lot of physical activity. Their brain is really connected, especially in their frontal lobe. Now, the purple lines, that shows you the brain connectivity of a group of high school students who dropped out of high school and spent 12 or more hours a day at the internet cafe playing video games or surfing the net. Now, do you guys see all of these connections? Do you see all of these connections? Ah, there we go. This is the sensory and the motor cortex. That's the part of the brain that does hand-eye coordination. They're growing a lot of connections here, but look at how many networks they have into their prefrontal cortex. One area of connectivity. This is the brain's rule. Use it or? Now, if we look at pornography, same thing. Too much dopamine. 1 half hour of viewing pornography increases dopamine levels by 350%. That is the same exact amount as snorting a line of cocaine. But it changes not only the frontal lobe, but here's the nucleus accumbens. This is the part of the brain that makes dopamine. It is 4 times the size that it should be in somebody who uses pornography compulsively every day, compared to someone who doesn't. What we're hearing is that it's causing something called arousal addiction. That means the human who uses that becomes only aroused by what they see on the screen instead of real life human relationships. And not only does it change that part of our physiology, but it also changes what you think about what intimacy should be. I have so many young women that are on my caseload who are like, dude, am I supposed to like being choked? I've had young boys ask me, do girls really like being hit? I'm like, where are you learning this? A young man I just had on my caseload was kicked out of his fraternity because he choked someone during an intimate moment and she reported him. And when he sat down on my sofa, he's like, what happened? And I said, okay, tell me where you learned about sex. He's like, porn, doesn't everybody? No, good. In this slide, we are looking from the back of the brain forward. This is somebody who has never been diagnosed with an eating disorder at all, no sugar addiction, but she just ate sugar. This was an actual show on ABC News. It was really amazing. This woman, you can see the brain lighting up. Here's the limbic system, both sides. Now, they compared her brain scan to somebody who had sugar addiction. She had been addicted to the dopamine that comes from sugar-dense, high-calorie foods. She had not eaten sugar for years, but she ate sugar for this study, and look what happened to her brain. Lights up. Now, what you see, here's the spinal cord. Here's her limbic system on both sides, lit up, full of dopamine. But if we turn her frontal lobe around, it would be off. She would be in what we affectionately call a food coma, which is just a really nice way of saying we're intoxicated on sugar-dense, high-calorie foods. Now, when I started to look at these studies, about 10 years ago, they started publishing studies about depression and anxiety. Now, these were all done with adults, but I want you to think about how many young people you know who have depression and anxiety. And what we see is that from the side, when we are not depressed, our brain is all on working together. And when we are depressed chronically, this is an adult too who's had chronic depression for about 10 years, the entire frontal lobe just down regulates. This person is just a limbic system living. But this is a beautiful study. This is looking from the top down again. After 6 weeks of treatment, this man talked to a therapist and he took an antidepressant. And you can see what's happening in his brain. His entire brain is turning back on, but look at this beautiful frontal lobe. We have to get help and use our skills soon. And this is a study of a young lady who was in one of those really tight brain machines and started to have a panic attack. So what we see, her limbic system is lit up, red hot. She's freaking out. Her occipital lobe, the part of the brain connected to the eyes, she's freaking out. She's looking around for a way to escape. But look what happens to her frontal lobe. Down regulated. Okay, now think about it. If you've got depression or anxiety and your frontal lobe is down-regulated for a long time during high school, does it get to grow normally? No, just like drugs or alcohol. Now, this is a study that shows how influential this advertising is. This is a really cool study. They looked at a picture. Can you guys see she's drinking and driving? Okay, what do you guys think? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Down, yes. And that is what the young people said as well. Adolescent brain. They had a lot of different teens participate in this study, and here's what they saw. The occipital lobe, the part of the brain connected to the eyes, they're looking at the picture. But when the researcher says, what do you think about this behavior? They said the same thing. Thumbs down, bad behavior, don't do it, duh. But you guys, look what happened when they increase the likes. You can see, no clapping, please, no clapping. Not an okay behavior. It is one of the #1 ways that teenagers die in this country is through drunken driving accidents. Boo, exactly. But look about what happened. Thank you. These guys, they are looking at the picture. Would you help her put her frontal lobe back on? Oh, there we go. Friends don't let friends, right? Go with their frontal lobes. Okay. When they asked the young people, okay, what's happening? Why is this going on? They literally said, well, if more people like it, maybe it's not so bad. You can see the reward pathway, the hit in their limbic system. The hit in the limbic system going up, that's dopamine. Then you can see the connection that it has into their prefrontal cortex. Now they are reassessing. And when they asked, what's going on? They're like, well, you know, more people like it. Maybe it's not so bad. They start rationalizing. They start making up stories. Like maybe she only did it just for a few minutes, just to get home. They start making up things. Remember, our brain likes, but does it really mean something positive or something good? And then the last thing, when your frontal lobe is off, when your frontal lobe is not on, we have a nickname for it when you're an adult. It's called acquired narcissism. The operative word is acquired. Sometimes you might hear a psychologist call it poor mentalization. But here's how serious this is. A lot of you guys live with adults who have this because they struggle with substances. They struggle with addictive behaviors. This does not make the best parent the parent that you deserve. So one of the things that I get asked a lot by young people after they see this is, if I have a parent or a loved one or a sibling who is doing this, what should I do? And what I say is, always talk to them and ask them to stop. Keep trying. So the fourth and final part of the presentation is what can we do? So these are the things I want you guys to think about that the addiction for profit industry is not. Here is what we know. Will you guys support your students to be respectful? How about an applause for that? Keep your brain on. Your state has been through hell within the past decade. You guys have had addiction for profit industries coming into your state, robbing your prevention dollars, moving them into areas that are all about addiction for profit. Marketing and telling you that these things are okay. Please, you guys, stay seated. Grow your skills. Grow your skills. Because if you know how to feel negative feelings, if you know how to cope, you won't need to smoke them away, drink them away, use them away. Take good care, and thank you for participating.